Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Dungeon Masters Dojo podcast. This is a show for game masters and players alike. We hope to bring you tips and tricks to elevate your game and develop the art of dungeon mastery. I'm your host, Louis Aponte, and these are your dungeon masters, Scott Labby and Bill Robotile. Let's enter the dojo and see what they have in store for us today. Hey, Scott. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Lou.
How are you?
And we have a special guest, Dave Wile's with us.
From
Hey, how y'all doing?
Retro RPG Reviews, one of my favorite YouTube channels.
How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing great. Great to be back with you guys at the DMD.
Good to see you yet once again.
I really liked your episode that you did on Star Frontiers, one of my all-time favorite games, so it was really nice to see that.
Yeah, that video is doing very well. It was very popular. I'm probably going to be doing some more videos on that because like there's the 3-part adventure that the first part is in the box set. So I'll probably be looking at those modules.
I think I told you, I still have my set from high school,
Right.
which was a long time ago because back then books were made out of paper. and you didn't find them on tablets like you do now. So I look forward to that very, very much. And it's kind of cool that you can find all the Star Frontiers materials relatively inexpensive on Drive-Thru-RPG.
Not only is it on there for download, but you can also pretty much everything they have is available for print on demand.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So why do we have Dave here other than it's cool to hang out with him?
I thought that was it.
That's really the only reason.
What other reason do we need? I believe it's to talk about OSR.
Yeah, we had to pull one of our resident experts in
Yeah.
on the OSR. So phone call was made to Dave, and here we are with him. He's going to school us on the OSR.
Yeah, because I have questions.
School you on the old school.
Yes.
What is an OSR?
Old school revival or is generally or old school renaissance, depending on the R means different things to different people, but generally the OSR is a look back at gaming as it was in the early 70s and 80s. It's actually not necessarily that specific, but it can be a drive towards less codification in your RPG and more DM control in your game. More reliance on maintaining your torches and supplies, and so that kind of thing is a lot more important with the old school. And so you have death is a little bit more frequent or possible, and depending on how you play it. But in general, it's an idea that you're going to be playing a simpler game, a game that is less codified, so that gives the players and the DM a lot more options to just kind of roll with it and let the story develop without having to worry about mechanics.
Nice. Now,
Sounds perfect, actually.
actually, it's just flashback to the real early days. Chainmail, which had like maybe 14 rules in it, by my recollection. How did this all come about? I mean, and why?
Well, it's really an interesting evolution, and I'm pretty sure that Osric, the old school Renaissance and Index compilation, was the first to put out a rule set that emulated a previous edition, which in that case it was first edition AD&D, and that came about by looking at the at that time the third edition of the game had been out, and they had put out the OGL, and which was basically Wizards of the Coast pretty much trying to set 3.5 D&D as the default role-playing game. And if you recall that era, there was third-party material from just about everywhere. And so they figured out that they could they didn't have to do 3.5. They could do anything they wanted. And so since those books were out of print, they redid them. And the advantage to that is that you have a very well-written rule set. And as much as I love Gary Gygax, ancient Gygaxian is a little bit hard to translate sometimes.
Yeah, it is. That's a good way of putting it too. Yeah.
I was going to, relate it to hieroglyphs at times, but you kind of had to know how to speak it before you could translate it.
So you have sort of a Rosetta Stone that teaches you what the rules really meant. And I know that as I read through Osric, I actually learned things that, oh, that's how that was supposed to work. I never did it that way. Prime example, if you roll a D6 for surprise, all right, let's say, for example, the monster surprises on a 1 to 3. All right. If the monster rolls a 3, they're actually going to go 3 times before you get to go. If they roll a 2, they'll go 2 times. And if they roll a 1, they'll go 1 time, on the surprise round. Or if the players are surprised in that respect. So that's a little obscure rule that I had no idea. Because you normally was just like, okay, I rolled a whatever it is. And, oh, the monster, you're surprised. And we do a surprise round and then we move on. It's not a round. So there's a lot of interesting rules and clarifications that you'll find in that rule set that is pretty interesting. So I highly recommend, if you like first edition Dungeons and Dragons, check out Osric. But then, of course, it moved on a little bit. So then you had Labyrinth Lord. Labyrinth Lord is a emulation of the Moldvay Cook rule set, or BX, Basic and Expert sets. Which you're probably the mauve box set and the blue box set, which is a lot of people's introduction that came out in 1981 to Dungeons and Dragons, and everybody moved on to AD&D. But of course, that particular rule set has gained a lot of nostalgia and appreciation for its clarity and its simplicity, and so that a lot of people play that version of the game. And what you'll find with OSR is you'll find that different rule sets take on and emulate certain other earlier editions of the game. For example, Swords and Wizardry actually emulates the white box set, the very first rule set of Dungeons and Dragons, with a lot more clarity and some options for different rules and things like that inside of it. That also helps make the game easier to play, smoother to play. So the other advantage is you'll get some kind of like some tweaks and little house rules that the author will add into the game that they like.
So why all these rules variations? You answered the part of the question a little bit just now, but can't we just get a copy of our favorite rules set, especially now with print on demand being so readily available? What's the draw?
Well, as I said, ancient Gygaxian is a little hard to translate sometimes. So you have 40 years of gameplay, so the rules can be rewritten for clarity, and you can add in the errata that they meant to add in, or maybe certain rules that were everybody played wrong because the rule was written poorly is now rewritten for clarity. So that helps out and makes it easier for newer players that have never played those old games before, to learn how to play the game.
That was cut and dry.
Yeah, pretty simple.
Very simple. So for somebody that's just getting into OSRs, what would you recommend for them? And what are your favorite rules? Your rule set, I should say.
Well, there's a lot of outstanding rule set. We are really in a renaissance of old school right now, and it has been kind of going in this direction for a lot of years. The ability for people to become their own publisher, and the ability of people to get crowdfunding through Kickstarter allows them to ease the cost and the burden of getting things together. And you have a lot of great creators who are outstanding organizers and have put together some amazing material for us. I would think of Old School Essentials, which is an emulation of Moldvay Cook, as I mentioned earlier. But the interesting thing about Old School Essentials is that it is a bullet-pointed rule set. There's no fluff in that game or rule set. You open these nice little digest-sized booklets, and they just lay out bullet point by bullet point the rule system. So if you're in play and you look it up, even for spells or monsters or whatever, boom, there it is. and it's written clear, and everything that you need to know is directly there. However, I will say that I have a certain like of the fluff. I like a little fluff. I don't have to have a lot of fluff, but I like to have some of that when I'm reading. It makes the rule set more enjoyable. So in regards to my personal favorite game, I like Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. I love that game. And that game is one of those games that really breaks all the rules of what you're supposed to do and does it so well that it makes it even better. For example, generally you don't couple the setting with the rules. That's kind of like a no-no. The rules are the rules, and then the DM takes the rules and they make their own campaign setting and they do whatever they want with it. And they customize it. However, what Talanian did with his rule set was he customized the rules and the classes and the combat system and the magic and all that kind of stuff with his Hyperborean setting. It's kind of like a cross between Conan the Barbarian and H.P. Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith. And if you're into that kind of pulp, dark fantasy kind of role playing, you'll be in heaven. The world itself is bizarre. It's kind of like a hexagonal flat earth plane. The sun never really reaches a zenith at noon. It hovers on the edge of the plane, never getting quite high enough and giving everything kind of an orangish pinkish hue rather than the normal brightness you get from a noonday sun. And it's also colder. So you have a colder plane, and you have a mix of creatures from Greek mythos, traditional D&D, and Lovecraftian creatures. You have Yithians and the Great Race and Shoggoth, and you have the great old ones like Cthulhu and Yog-Sothoth, and all of that is involved in there. Plus you have Helios and Artemis and those various gods as well. So it's a very intriguing setting. And then, of course, the classes are all customized to take advantage of this setting. So I started a campaign with that about a month and a half ago. We're into session 7. And wow, everybody loves it. And I've gone from 5th edition to that.
Sounds intriguing.
I like this man's professionalism so much that he segued into the next 2 questions without seamlessly and in chronological order. It's almost like he has them in front of him.
It's amazing.
I am intrigued, and you've sold me on it. So when are we playing?
You can get on Vorpal board and find a night that I'm free. My DJ business is really taking off lately, so I don't have any free nights except for my Sunday, which is my in-person game.
Yeah, and that's not too bad of a drive. So I think if we start now,
if you guys start, you could be here by Sunday.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. We'll bring pizza and beer or something. So is this a made up universe? This Hyperborea? You said it was kind of like a blend between Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, and those two guys spent a lot of time corresponding on their stuff. How much of it does it take from that old pulpy kind of genre, or is it like a reinvention?
Well, it's definitely Jeffrey Talanian's take on it. All right, so that it's his baby. But Hyperborea itself was originally mentioned in the Greek myths, and Clark Ashton Smith ran with that, and he created his own human in a prehistory kind of world, a world that existed before history. You have interesting thing about human history is we've only been around 10,000 years as far as modern history goes, but we were in our current form for under 200,000 years before that. So what was there? Maybe it was something, maybe there were civilizations that rose and fell. And so you have that kind of prehistory that Clark Ashton Smith built on. And then you had Robert E. Howard, who also built on that same thing. An age undreamed, as it were, right? So Jeffrey Talanian has taken that, and of course he's infused it with Lovecraft, and there was Lovecraft in original Conan stories, so that there's definitely a lot of things to build on there. So it's definitely a dark fantasy game, to be sure. You have takes on Shadow over Innsmouth, which is one of the stories, and the modules are really excellently written. So if you want to get started in the game, they're actually getting ready to release the third printing of the game. They just finished the Kickstarter and it really well, so that probably will be around in March or so. But you can still pick up the PDFs on Drive-Thru RPG, and I'm pretty darn sure he has copies left of the Player's Handbook, which I've discovered is the most useful thing out of that. The current rule book is 600 pages long and includes essentially the monster manual, all the game and player information, and the setting all in one book. It's a beast. And so the Player's Handbook only includes just the game information. So if you wanted to DM this now and you had the PDF with the setting information on it and then a hard copy of the Player's Handbook, you would be just fine. That would work for you pretty well, I'm pretty sure.
So, just out of curiosity,
Yes.
why would you recommend somebody to go back into these OSRs, specifically the one that you're talking about now?
You know, I may not recommend it for everyone. It may not be for everyone. But I think, and I want to preface this with saying that I think 5th edition and Pathfinder are fine games. I think they're good. They have a large fan base, and there's a lot of great material available for those settings. My problem with 5th edition, I think it's starting to suffer from bloat. I was on my 3rd campaign with 5th edition, and one of the things that I noticed that really kind of started to grate on me as a dungeon master was that magic seemed to solve everything. And there really were no struggles. And a prime example of that would be prestidigitation. So I say, and I narrate, all right, you've been traversing through the swamp for several hours. You're knee deep in muck. The foul stench of the swamp permeates your nostrils. Insects nip and bite at all your exposed skin, and you're covered head to toe on mud. But finally, after trudging through the mire, you reach the bank at the far end, and you throw yourselves down in exhaustion. And the mage goes, okay, well, I cast prestidigitation over and over again until we're all clean.
I'm going to agree with you on that, because I can say the same thing about good berry, how it takes some of the survival away. Mm-hmm. Because now you got berries that'll keep you full for a day, every day.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's a certain readiness to good berry, all right, but cantrips are, you can cast them unlimited number of times, right? It's just, I can just do it. It's a 1 foot by 1 foot square. Okay, well, I just keep casting it over and over again until everybody's clean. So you kind of take away some of the narration of the game, and then of course there's a lot of vision. You know, like for example, if you are pack chained warlock, you can get a familiar that will allow you to see in well, first of all, you can see in magical darkness, and you can see through the eyes of the familiar as long as you're on the same plane. So essentially, the familiar goes in and explores the dungeon while everybody else waits outside.
Yeah, that was one thing, because I'm playing a Pact of the Chain Warlock right now. Yep. And that was one of the questions I had, what is my distance? Because it really doesn't state.
On the same plane.
Exactly.
As long as you're on the same plane, you can see through see and hear and even cast spells through your familiar. You can turn your familiar into a little spider so you can crawl into the doors, so you don't have to worry about the doors either.
Yep.
It's no longer a gritty game.
It's not exactly the most gritty thing if you like a gritty, down-to-earth, dark fantasy game. And I think there might be some players, not all of them, some of them are still loving the game, but there might be some players that are looking for a little bit different kind of challenge. And those players are definitely those that would probably enjoy the OSR, would enjoy the simplicity of it. And the other thing I'll say about that is your casual player probably is not utilizing all the cool things that are available for their character in 5th edition. I mean, we're gamers and we've been doing this for a long time, but 5th edition has brought in a lot of new people, and I can attest that I have recruited quite a few people into my own campaign who, once we got up to some of the higher levels, like 7th level and above, the number of things that their characters got just overwhelmed them, and they just weren't there. Okay, I swing my sword, that just move on, or it just took so long, or they had a plan for something that they wanted to do that they thought would be cool, but then when they tried to do it, it really wasn't something the rules allowed for.
Right.
Okay, and they just misread the rule,
Or someone else's cool thing kind of trumped theirs.
Exactly.
Because the game is homogenizing the characters. Everyone can cast magic. You got to try hard not to cast magic. And when everyone has something special, it's no longer special.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
That's one of my pet peeves. I mean, I like 5th edition. We're having fun with it. We do a lot of home rules to kind of scale that back. But still, that's my biggest pet peeve with 5th edition right now is just everyone. They're homogenizing the character classes.
Everything is being changed. Healing, for example, not to take away from anything, but you could be a 10th level fighter, have 100 hit points hypothetically. You take 99 points of damage, you take a long rest, and you're automatically healed all those points as rules is written.
Rules is written, but I would point out that one of the things that they did do is in the back of the Dungeon Master's Guide for 5th edition, there are some great optional rules for healing, which I implemented, which means that you used your hit dice, and you had to take a full rest to recover your hit dice.
That's what I do. If you can either use your hit dice for X amount of hit points back, and if it's a short rest, you take your hit dice, but you have it again.
Right. So, and of course, healing kits. You have to use. I also require that you have to use healing kits in order to heal. So if you don't have any healing kits, you can't spend your hit dice.
I'm gonna have to add that one in. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right. So, remind our listeners where we can find you.
Which one?
All our listeners, not just one.
Where you can find me?
Yes, you personally. Yes.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. Because I didn't quite hear that. So I'm on YouTube, RPG Retro Reviews. My moniker is Captain Courageous. It's CaptCourajus. So that's spelled weird. That name actually came about, that spelling came about because I was playing games online and I just got tired of trying to figure out what name to make up that somebody else hadn't already made up. That was unique, and that's what I came up with, and nobody has it. At least now, until it's went public. Now people are going to copy my cool name.
You've been doing this for a while now. Is it?
My first video was in 2014.
Wow.
That's good. That's a good amount of time.
That's a hell of a run.
Yeah, I think I'm caught up on your catalog, too.
I'm just about there.
Yeah.
I got 166 videos that you can peruse, and it goes everything from looking at all the editions of the game, which some of my first videos, not the best production and mic quality, guys, so I warn you now, but it gets better as you go. And then I really enjoy looking at a lot of the old school classic modules. I did the entire G series, Against the Giants series. I did the entire D series, Descent into the Depths of the Earth. I did the Queen of the Demon Web Pits as well. So I did that entire, GDQ series, which is, I think that's like total of 4 videos there. The Queen of the Demon Web Pits was a 2-parter. And that was one of my favorite videos because there's so much interesting historical context to that module. Because Gary Gygax did the previous 6 adventures, and then David Sutherland ended up doing the final module in the series. And while Gary was very rah-rah cheering in the opening part introduction of that module, later on down the road, as we get into listening to different forums, when the internet became available, Gary wasn't exactly happy with how things went. So that was interesting to put that historical context in there and talk about the early, how things were, the troubles at TSR, as it were. and find out that the demon web was actually inspired by a table mat that David Sutherland was looking at with that crisscross pattern. And that's what gave him the idea for the demon webs, which is still a cool idea, but I don't think Gary was exactly happy with that. So I try to look at historical context. I try to bring out some trivia and some fun, obscure facts with my videos, and try to learn as much as I can and then convey that to my audience. I think that's a lot of fun to have that kind of context given to you in addition to the coolness of the adventure itself.
Yeah, that's my favorite part. You know, I get the nostalgia piece because a lot of those modules I've played through. I remember owning them, and then that historical context behind them that fills in all the gaps behind the scenes. It's a pretty neat thing. Like, our hobby has a lot of lore outside of the lore, you know, real world lore attached to it, which makes it really interesting. Can you give us a hint on what we have to look forward to from Retro RPG Reviews? Is that?
I can actually do that. I'm getting ready to do a video on the Shadow Elves.
Oh.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Shadow Elves, but that was a Gazetteer supplement for the Mystara setting. And that module is absolutely a game changer in regards to the consequences for the world of Mystara as a whole. If you had been buying the Gazetteers from 1 through 12 at that time, you would have been slowly learning about what's going on in the world. And one of the interesting connections in the world of Mystara that they did, which I thought was really great, and you can credit Bruce Hurd with that, was he connected the modern day Mystara with Dave Arneson's Blackmoor setting, which was said to take place 3,000 years before the current timeline, or 4,000 years before the current timeline. And so a Blackmoor device exploded, tilting the world on its axis and creating havoc. And so after that cataclysm, that leads to where things are in the current timeline. And then they actually did a series, which I have reviewed fully on my channel, which is the DA1 through 4 series, which is your Blackmoor, Temple of the Frog, Duchy of Ten, and what's the other one? There's a 4th module in there that I'm forgetting. But anyway,
Crash spaceship, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So the SS Beagle, and Stephen the Rock, who was the evil high priest, who was actually one of the crew members for the SS Beagle, who went into the swamp and decided to indulge in world domination by mutating frogs and a variety of other wild stuff. And so what's interesting is that they took that concept, and after those modules came out before the Gazetteer series, but that was in mind. And they took those modules and they said that something happened. Some Blackmoor scientists were messing with the crashed spaceship, the SS Beagle. This is hundreds of years after that adventure. And they were never vague on the specifics, but they did something wrong, and the nuclear reactor of the spaceship exploded. And of course, that caused the cataclysm. And what happened was the nuclear reactor caught the immortals of Mystara off guard, and they had to act. So they infused the remnants of the nuclear reactor with magic to save the world, and they buried it deep underneath the underground, which, interestingly enough, ended up residing directly underneath the School of Wizardry in the country of Galantry, which is a magocracy. And so that's Gazetteer 5, the Principalities of Galantry. So that's that. So you're going up to Gazetteer 12 is when the Shadow Elf supplement. And that is a group of underground elves. They're not drow. They have pale skin. A lot of them are born with these interesting birthmarks, which have these interesting patterns, and they consider those the priests, and they go to the temple to be raised as clerics of Raphael, who is the the immortal patron of the Shadow Elves. And they go around collecting the soul stones, which are said to have the souls of fallen and dead Shadow Elves. And you have to collect those souls so they'll be saved and bring them back to the temple. That's not really what's going on. And if you want to find out what's actually going on, you have to watch my video.
That was a great set of gazetteers that they did.
Amazing. They really were. The Etruscan clans is not so good, but I would say that's an outlier. But man, what they did with the various settings for the elves of Alfheim, the dwarves of Rockholm, what really the 5 shires, which is what they did for the halfling. They called them the Hin. So that was really amazing. The setting for they did like a Viking setting, which was really cool. So they really infused a lot of historical cultures and interesting, and then blended that into and this is for the basic, what would you would say, the basic Dungeons and Dragons game.
Yeah.
That's the other important component. That was not written for AD&D. That was all written for the basic Dungeons and Dragons game. And that made me want to play that setting, that system, more than AD&D at the time. But I could never get anybody to play it for me. Because you say, hey, let's try this. Let's switch over to that. And they go like, hey, man, the races are classes, dude. And then that was the end of it. You know?
I recall like the orc gazetteer, and I forget the name of
Orcs
it.
of Thar.
Yeah, being
It's
a little on the
amazing.
goofy side.
It's amazingly and wonderfully goofy.
Yeah.
One of the cool supplements on there is the fact that you can cut this section out and fold it up, and you have a Thar's Manual of Good Conduct. All of it misspelled, of course. And it goes into the various things that orcs do in the Legion, right, as they say. And if you just want to sit down and end up in complete and total tears as you read through that, it's a good time. But you could play orcs. You could have a whole campaign as humanoids in that gazetteer if you wanted to.
Awesome.
I think you
Setting
can get
for the
those.
Orcs of Thars and the Broken Lands in One Mystara.
It was a drive-through RPG has. I don't know if they have all of them. I've seen a few of them. I seem to recall.
They have all of them, but not all of them are available on print on demand. But the Orcs of Thar is one of those that's available on print on demand. At least it was last time I checked. They sometimes change those things.
And you mentioned to me you're going to a con, so if we have any listeners out that way, they could keep their eyes open for you.
Yes, I just want to. Yeah, I'm going to Gary Con in March, so I'm really looking forward to that. I haven't been to a con in a long time, so I'll be up in Lake Geneva doing the pilgrimage, as it were, and I'm going to be running 2 games there. So if you're going to Gary Con and you want to sign up, signups are not available yet. They're still finalizing the events. But the 2 events I'm running the Rats in the Walls for the Hyperborea setting. And I'm also running the Tower of Xenopus for using the original Holmes basic set.
That was a good time when we played that.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was.
Thank you for running that for us.
That was an absolutely classic good time.
Yep.
Scott, I think you had a little bit of a challenge there.
Yep. Yeah.
I've told that story a few times.
That was a nail biter.
Yeah.
That was quite the nail biter. But it all turned out well. That's all that matters.
Your viewers should know. Let me narrate this a little bit. So, going through the dungeon, the Tower of Xenopus, the party had kind of done a large circle, but not exactly knowing where everything connected. And so, assuming certain things that they didn't actually know, they figured they could get to the exit quicker through a different way they hadn't been before, which was true. But they were low on spells and hit points. And they found 4 skeletons who took them down mostly.
Yeah. Who got trashed?
So Scott's dwarf got taken down, but he didn't die. You didn't die. We were playing 5th edition, so you roll the die to find out how many hours you're unconscious after you get to 0 hit points, after you stabilize. So he wakes up several hours later to the sound of crunching and gnawing in the dark, dank dungeon. And as it turns out, ghouls that had found his fallen comrades and were taking advantage of the impromptu meal they discovered. So he had to sneak away from the ghouls with 1 hit point.
Yeah, that was, I think that was Matt Fillion's, was it wizard or something?
Yeah,
cleric?
It's cleric. Yeah.
Yeah, they were eating poor Matt.
I heard it was tasty.
That was gruesome. Yeah,
apparently, it was pretty good, good tasting because the ghouls were distracted long enough and then of course the skeletons attacked the ghouls, and while they were fighting, you ran really fast for a little dwarf.
They were health conscious ghouls. My dwarf was clearly not a heart healthy meal. A lot of cholesterol wrapped up in that dwarf. Yeah, that was a good time.
That was a very good time.
The Tower of Xenopist, a huge chunk of nostalgia, as well.
And I think that huge chunk of nostalgia is one of the reasons the OSRs are doing so well. Is a flashback to the early days.
I'd say nostalgia is a big factor because a lot of people that played 40 years ago are getting back into the game, and then they're discovering the OSR. But I'd also say that a lot of people who are, like I said earlier, are in some of the modern rule sets and we're looking for a different challenge and are interested in the fascinating history of Dungeons and Dragons migrate to the OSR as well. And I think that's an opportunity to perpetuate the OSR long after this generation of gamers is gone.
Your generation. I'm going to live forever.
Well, or die trying.
Well, I'm half undead already, so
we just have to find his phylactery.
I have a deal for you.
And that's Talking the OSR with Dave Wile from Retro RPG Reviews. We'll see you next time in the dojo. That's going to conclude this episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Please subscribe to the podcast for more great content. If you'd like to hear a particular topic, you can reach us on Facebook at the Dungeon Masters Dojo, or you can drop us an email at thedungeonmastersdojo@gmail.com. Thank you, and have a good day.